All right. So thanks everybody for rocking with us one more time. I'm Brandon Middleton, and you are in the green room right now. So appreciate the time and attention. Today, I'm super excited to be able to chop it up and have a conversation with a buddy of mine, Austin Curry. If this is your first time rocking with us, the community green room conversations that we're having are meant to um, mirror and mimic like the actual green room that you might find at a concert venue where the artist or the talent or whoever you come to see kind of chills in the backstage area with their friends and family before they go live. So this will be kind of a let your hair down, calm conversation to just talk about insights and journeys traveled and just share ideas that we think the broader community that'll watch this will be able to appreciate and learn and grow from. So with that, Austin, you want to take a couple minutes to introduce yourself and say hi to the people, and then we'll jump into some dialogue here.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, Brandon, and to the folks watching this, thank you for tuning in. My name is Austin Curry. I do a lot of things. I consider myself an eternal student. By day, I'm a mechanical engineer. I design structures and um, basically systems for autonomous vehicles. Started my career in traditional automotive and then transitioned to tech because I wanted to kind of just escape the Midwest and the legacy companies out that way and get into something more fast-paced and exciting. And I really wanted to live in California too. So I've been here in Oakland for 3.5 years now. And I also am very passionate about and active in the real estate space. So I started investing 5 years ago, or almost six now, in multifamily in the south side of Chicago. Took a little pit stop on my way to California from Michigan to Chicago for a couple of years. And I really fell in love with the asset class. I fell in love with the impact I could have on communities. And I have worked to scale that up here a few years. I went from hustling homes in the hood by myself to doing so with a business partner, and then moving up to founding a firm this past year called Harriet Capital, where we have a 5-person team and we go after larger commercial properties in Black communities with the intent on community building and also with the intent of offering like high quality private offerings, private investment offerings, that is, to regular Black folks like you and I. And so that's the short of it. And like I said, I come to that through a lot of different angles. I've always been a designer. I've always been in the physical space. I'm studying architecture right now just because, we had a great conversation with Rada, and it just got my brain going on how space planning could help me kind of reimagine the spaces in our communities and our neighborhoods. And it's just a rabbit hole that I'm constantly in. And I love talking to brothers like yourself about it and just building more conscious Black investors every day.
Yeah, I love those two words you put together, eternal student. It's so fascinating, kind of the time that we're in these days. If you got a good internet connection and a head on your shoulders, you can like specialize in and go down the rabbit hole of so many different things. And, I also am interested in real estate too, outside of my day job in tech. So it's cool to be able to connect with folks who um, are like-minded. And I'd love to have you rewind a little bit. You mentioned you escaped from the Midwest. So like, take us back. Are you from Chicago, from Detroit? Which place in the Midwest are you from? How did you grow up?
Yeah. No, so I'm actually a bit of a nomad. So I was born in Charlotte, North Carolina. My pops was very young in his career when I was born, and we moved up and down the East Coast quite a bit. I think I went to 5 different elementary schools. And then I settled back, or they settled us back in North Carolina. So I would say I grew up in Durham.
Mhm.
And then from there, I went to school in St. Louis, and that was kind of my entry point. I really didn't know much about the Midwest prior to going to college. I went there and played ball, studied engineering, and then I went ahead and kicked off my career in Detroit joining Ford,
Mhm.
because that was always my intent in studying engineering. I wanted to be an automotive engineer. I really love cars. I like motorcycles too, but cars
Mhm.
is really my passion. And then a few years of that, I was there for 3, 4 years. Went to Chicago for a couple of years, really because my fiance was working out there, so I just took a transfer.
Yep.
That's why I kicked off the real estate piece, and then we really felt like we had to go kind of implant ourselves into this tech movement. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity out here.
Mhm.
She took a job in a big tech. I joined a startup, and I'm on my second startup now. And she's on her second big tech company, and we're doing that whole thing and continuing our passions in the spare time too.
That's amazing. You got a young face still on you. So like you, and that black don't crack, you still look like you get a good amount of sleep at night. But you seem to have done a number of cool things so far enough to this point. So yeah, salute, man. That's something that there's a lot of people who are going to watch this. I'm sure their dream or a part of the path and the journey that they'll have in front of them is to, maybe move cities or to maybe do something entrepreneurial or maybe do something that intersects with like the tech industry. So super cool to be able to hear some of that from you. Did your travels, from the East Coast to St. Louis and then kind of all around, um, grow a desire in you to actually do real estate? Did you notice anything as you moved around that kind of made you fall in love with it? Or like what was your um, kind of entry point into saying, oh, outside of engineering, I also want to focus on this other thing?
Yeah, for sure. So actually, I have always loved travel, but I didn't really think of it in that manner. I think for me, it was a couple things. So first, my father is an entrepreneur,
Mhm.
as is my mother. So I was always raised around that.
Mhm.
So it was almost like a given that I would launch my own venture in
Mhm.
some form or fashion.
Yeah.
And then beyond that, in Detroit, I moved to Detroit in 2012,
Mhm.
and Detroit went bankrupt in 2013. So I was kind of there in the quote unquote rock bottom.
Mhm.
And I don't say that to talk shit because I love Detroit and I had a wonderful time. But because of the timing, houses were being sold in Detroit it was very common to get a house for like $1,000,
Wow.
right? Because everyone had left. There was a mass exodus really just to the suburbs. And there's a ton of reasons for why that is. But because of that, in my last year or so of Detroit, I was really on my head to buy a house because everyone was like, you have to do this. It's an unbelievable opportunity, so on and so forth. And so, long story short, actually, I'll give you a little more detail on this because it's funny. I found the perfect house for me. It was very close to downtown. Detroit used to be the wealthiest city in the world. A lot of people don't know that. So it has these huge, huge houses. So I found this home. It was probably built in the 40s. It was 4 stories, well over 3,000 square foot, had a servant's quarters in it,
Wow.
right? Like an obscenely big house.
Yeah.
And it was listed for $70,000,
Mhm.
right? The owner bought it for $11,000 3 years prior.
Hmm.
So I bid on it. I got outbid. I lost it. Long story short, I was unable to purchase anything in Detroit.
Mhm.
And then I moved to Chicago because that's where my fiance was living.
Mhm.
And that just bugged, like that irked me. Like I'm a very chill person, like to hang out with, but professionally I'm very type A. Like
Yeah.
I'm not someone who, when I set my sights on something, I don't do well with not achieving that, whatever that looks like. And so when I got to Chicago, I was just annoyed in a weird way. I'm like, that was bullshit. Like I don't not execute on things. So I feel like that was really the thing, combined with the fact that I wanted another source of income anyway. And
Mhm.
that just pushed me to take the risk of, because you're from Chicago, I believe, right?
Yeah,
Or the
that's
south suburbs. So an outsider buying a property on the south side of Chicago is a very risky thing, as you obviously know, because the neighborhoods, that's a whole world right there. It's not a cohesive place. Every neighborhood is different. It's block by block, 100 other things. Those are risky play. But by that point, I was so determined, and I am the opposite of risk averse. I've reduced that strategy as I get older, get ready to get married and things of that nature. But at the time, I was like, what could go wrong, right? So I really just jumped in, and it was a sink or swim opportunity, essentially. But we're still here, so we're swimming.
Yeah, it's amazing. There's like lots of bumps and scratches and all this stuff that it's my pleasure now to share with other people so that they can avoid kind of the pitfalls and the potholes and the banana peels. But um, yeah, it's interesting to reflect and to see like um, our country and like different urban areas go from, the bottom, like you mentioned in Detroit, to super gentrified and now super like high priced. Like when I moved to the San Francisco Bay Area, it seemed like some of the tech companies were starting to kind of change the way that these cities were looking and like how much the rent costs to be in places. And my wife is actually from San Francisco, so she would tell me of like the old days and like the Fillmore and like all these different cultural things from the past. And for me to go into work every day and to see how those things are just fleeting or altogether like not there today has been interesting. And I'm sure you've seen a little bit of that as you've um, looked at different places to invest in and kind of put an investor's cap on it. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one thing I love about real estate is history is incredibly relevant. Generally speaking, I think the way history is taught in schools is just backwards and useless. They want you to remember dates. It's not dates in wars or names of battles that matter. It's patterns and trends, right? And nowhere is that more obvious and important than in real estate. So San Francisco was the Harlem of the West for a while, right? It was a jazz city, a port town, very blue collar, shipbuilding history. Tons of Black people migrated there from Texas and other southern states for these World War II opportunities. And it was just a dope, creative place, right? For a long, long time. And then in the span of 20 years, right, essentially all of that is eradicated because a few companies hit the market with a totally new product, aka the internet first, and then social media, and just wipe all of that away. So thinking about that, I'm starting to draw the trends, like see how cities evolve. And because like America is always a capitalism first nation, like we are the land of the free, we're here to get money, everyone comes here to get money, et cetera, et cetera. Cities essentially evolve. They essentially grow and die on the industry present in the cities.
Yeah.
We can obviously look to Detroit for the same thing, right? Detroit declined and essentially fell off the cliff when all of the American automakers were no longer competitive with their Japanese counterparts and European counterparts to some extent. So I think the interesting thing now that I'm thinking about in reference to your question is how can we divorce the health of a city from the industries present, given that we basically all of the educated population of the world have the opportunity to work remotely right now, right? Obviously, it's a different case if you're hourly or disenfranchised, as is always the case. But if we are educated Black folks, we have an opportunity to think like, I don't have to live where I work. That's why I'm leaving. I'm leaving the Bay. I was always looking for my exit plan from the Bay. I always thought I was going to go back east, but for a bunch of other reasons that we ended up choosing to attempt to settle in LA. And I always thought that I was going to have to leave tech to do so.
Yeah.
So when the pandemic hit, it was a perfect time for us to capitalize on that, and for me to take a mechanical engineering role, traditionally very much in person, take it remote. And so I guess to finish up, I would just say there's a really interesting opportunity for a bunch of younger, educated, high achieving Black people to reframe how we build and develop communities. And on a micro scale, I'm excited to do that in Inglewood. Inglewood's a prime example of another historically Black area. It's been totally defunded, de-resourced, and is very much in transition. And I think I can put my stamp on that in an authentic way that is not stamped like I want to come and change everything. Like I want to come and be of the soil, be of the community, and figure out what makes sense for that community, and attempt to help and weave my family into it, and then have a say and help the community have a say in how their city grows.
Yeah, that's interesting. Kind of self-determination of going to a place and seeing how you personally can affect it. I'm reading a book called The Color of Money by NYU professor named Marisa Baradaran. And the book is like a history of like Black banking in the United States going back, many, many years. And it's been interesting to hear kind of how people, like Jackie Robinson, he had the Freedom National Bank in Harlem. There's been a history of our people who have tried to like do for self, even going into Tulsa, like where they had Black Wall Street, and like all of that was burned to the ground with, very few legal consequences for the folks who jumped that whole situation off. It seems to me like the well-intentioned and the well-educated have only so much that they can do outside of kind of a larger system that needs to make like policy, regulatory, legislative changes in order for an entire kind of generation of Black and brown folks to like be successful. Maybe offer some thoughts around kind of ways that you think that partnership between those two sides might be able to work, or are you like totally apathetic about like, okay, this is probably never going to happen? Just give us a sense of kind of where you're at and like what your research and what your learning has led you to.
Definitely. I'm going to just go turn this light on real quick so I don't look like I'm sitting in the dark here.
No, all good. Metaphorically and in real life. Turn the light on for us, man.
Right. Yeah, so I definitely like to talk about what you just brought up, because I think I do a lot of real estate talking on various medias to get information out there. And when you're on social media, it becomes apparent that everyone has like put their stake in the ground on one side or the other of this fence, this psychological fence. And one side is the activist political side, and that simplified look is the person who is like, we are not going to invest ourselves to freedom. Everything is due to government choices. And usually there's a few other issues that are commonly associated with that. Go get our reparations, anti-capitalism, a few different other things. And then the other side is commonly like what I jokingly call LLC Twitter, who's like, we're everything we need. Don't buy your man a PS5, buy him an LLC for Christmas. You spending $200 on Jordans, but you ain't been to such and such, like that, right? So those are the unnuanced looks. And I am really interested in attempting to bridge those, because they're both lacking, in my opinion. And so to take the example of Inglewood again, I suppose, or any city, I believe that, first of all, housing, segregation, racism, all of that you referenced the color of law on our last conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And that book is an incredible must read for anyone who's interested in these topics. It spells out very well how the federal government was very intent on designing our communities into the way they are today.
Yep.
Right. And so once you read that book, you really, if you're on that LLC Twitter side that I was just joking about, you really need to give up the idea that we are totally self-deterministic. If I work hard enough and hustle hard enough, I, Austin Curry, can go anywhere and create my reality.
Yeah.
That's not exactly true. It's just not, right? And so I think on the other side of the fence, I will say that when we solely go seek changes from our federal government, who is truly our oppressor, we aren't using all of the tools at our disposal. I won't have as harsh a criticism for them, because I think we do need all those people who are going and doing that work, who are in the streets, who are fighting for policy. That work is necessary. But if we ignore our resources that we do have and we ignore local politics, we're not using all our tools. So where I think the gap can be bridged is, like I just said, local politics. Almost every policy that you hear our enlightened or activist Black populations argue for has existed in some city in the US at the local level, right? So like universal basic income exists in Stockton, right? For example, we achieved healthcare nationally for a short period of time before Trump came in and attempted to take it apart piece by piece. Many cities have achieved almost zero homelessness through various means. So the local level is where all of these things, that's where politics loses its polarization, let's say, right? You get to the national level, we can't have a real conversation about housing or really anything, because the Republicans have already taken their viewpoint, the Democrats have already taken their viewpoint, and never the two shall meet, right? On the local level, it's totally different. It's not really about Democrats and Republicans. It's in a city council meeting with 30 people, and it's John over here with one opinion, and it's Sally over here with another opinion, and they can compromise because they're neighbors.
Yeah.
Right? And their incentives are aligned. They want to improve their city. Now, I'm sure there's some of them, one of them might even be a conservative or Republican, but at the end of the day, if he or she or they is your neighbor, you all are both likely quite aligned on the ultimate goal of the city. And so I find that very inspiring. And I think that's where we can take our entrepreneurial mindsets and our strategic mindsets. That's the rooms that we need to go sit in, and we can have that conversation where it's, hey, I want to do this thing to improve the community, but I can also go get all of the context. So there's a building in Inglewood for sale downtown. It looks dope. I want the building, sort of. I haven't underwritten it and done my full analysis, but I'm like, I've put a pin in it. I got a lot on my plate right now, so I can't fully take that on, but it's in the back of my mind. I bookmarked it. I need to go to a meeting and understand the history and the context of this property, of the plans for this street in downtown, before I can just jump in and begin doing my, rugged individualism, bootstraps, LLC, Twitter thing. And I guess I'll just finish by saying that I can go take all those mentalities I have of being who I am as an executor, an entrepreneur, a hustler, and I can go build context by implanting myself into local politics.
Yeah, I appreciate that response so much. And I want to dig into a couple different things. Like one, I consider myself like a regular Black person, right? I have people in my life, my parents born and raised in Illinois, my grandparents born in Mississippi. So we had the whole kind of migration from the South to the Midwest story, like so many other Black people do. um, what you're speaking of as it pertains to um, kind of property acquisition, research, sitting in city council meetings, interfacing with people that might be just like you or not like you at all. For the listeners, I just want to call out that this is probably a place where you might be getting uncomfortable and doing some things that, as you look through your family tree, like nobody in your family is really like doing stuff like this. So, um, you come from a household of entrepreneurs and maybe like this was modeled for you. Um, but could you talk about maybe some firsts and some only type of experiences where you're like, man, I really need to do the back story kind of research on this thing, but it's not been modeled for me before. Probably as an engineer, you're probably only black person, only, black person in your company, maybe. So you get comfortable over time being the only. But just for the folks that are watching this, I want them to uh, not assume that we're kind of on different levels. These are two like regular black people who have had to be curious about something, scrape our knees and hit our heads a few times and then figure this thing out. So for the person who's never been to a city council meeting, or for the person who's like never done what we're talking about, what would you just say to those first timers?
Yeah, definitely. And first, I will say I want to call out my own privilege because there's nothing worse than there's a million podcasts where rich startup founders talk about how much hustle and grit they exhibited, and then you find out later their father is like the vice president of Ralph Lauren or something crazy, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
first off, you know, I'm a hustler, but I did not like get it from the mud. Like both my parents went to college. My grandfather went to college. My grandfather is a doctor,
Yeah.
and worked at Howard University for 40 years. So I'm extremely blessed, and I recognize that. And I just want to put that on the airways first. And then, like you said, you do get used to um, a certain level of discomfort when you decide that you want to be a high achiever, and that can be being the first black person in the room. I was the first black person hired in my current startup. It can be going into a city council meeting and just feeling uncomfortable, not knowing the lingo. I'm kind of in that process right now. I think the eternal student mentality helps me a lot with those psychological barriers because it's just like, hey, here I am again, learning something new that's going to benefit me and benefit those around me. And because of that, I don't know the things that a lifelong real estate investor, engineer, local politician is going to know because I am a student. I go and learn all these different disciplines and I pull them in internally and I reflect on them and then I create based on the various skill sets I learn along the way. So I think that is the biggest thing I would probably encourage any young black person from any walk of life to go do is like put yourself in that mindset. You are a learner, you are gonna learn, and then you're gonna, what's the word, you are going to actualize that knowledge.
Yeah.
And that cycle never stops. That cycle is lifelong. And the information is there. We just said it. You know, if you've got an internet connection, you have access to pretty much everything you need. If you want to be a real estate investor, a hustler, you want to get into tech, the pathways are numerous. And then I think finally to wrap it all up, I would just say we as the folks who have essentially made it to some level, we have just a continuous obligation to ease the path for folks who are not yet at our rung of the ladder, right?
Yeah.
So we need to be like looking back. We need to constantly be sending that hand back and offering to do resume reviews, elevator pitch interviews, or informational interviews rather. Everything we can do to just, we done got into certain rooms.
Yeah.
We need to kick the door open for other people to get in. And we're constantly going to be trying to get into new rooms.
Yes.
right? Like I am constantly attempting to get into that next room, but I can't forget to look back and kick the door in for everyone else trying to get into the room that I'm already sitting in.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that visual of like um those doors that kind of close automatically. So like once you open the door, like as it's trying to close itself back, you gotta like keep your foot in there. And for everybody that you want to come in behind you, be doing exactly what you're saying, the resume reviews and the interview prep and all of that. But then your other foot's like over the threshold of this new kind of area, and the work that you have to do to like represent your own viewpoint and the viewpoints of your community in this like new environment where blackness or brownness is not understood, and the narrative that's pervasive is not rooted in reality. That's also work that happens. I don't know how much visibility like our people who are going to watch this um, kind of have access to, but that's also necessary and hard work. And it takes tact, it takes strategy. Sometimes it takes a long time in order to move forward just a couple steps. But wanted to call it out and appreciate kind of the responses to that question. Um, Maybe we jump into something that is a little bit, it's like halftime, like we 30 minutes into this joint. We do a little bit of a lightning round and just kind of unearth a little bit more of who Austin is. I'll ask you maybe some quick questions just to see what you're currently reading and listening to, vacation spots you've traveled to. I don't know if you're a sneakerhead or fashion guy, like brands that you really love, stuff like that. So maybe we start off with food since it's almost lunchtime here in the Bay. Maybe first two or three choices for cuisine if you're in the East Coast, like where you grew up, or St. Louis, and then in the Bay Area. So maybe one dish from each part of the country, if you could reflect back over your life that you really, really feel.
For sure, yeah. So I'm obsessed with food. I think I'm a great chef. I bake bread. I do it all. So I'm very much the right person to ask. I would say my influences are always Southern. That's where I grew up. That's what my cooking is. And recently, I've spent a lot of time like studying the connections of Southern cooking to West African cooking. Because it's funny, we as Black people don't commonly think about the fact that soul food obviously came from Africa as well. But I never had thought of it in that way. So I've been really nerding out on that recently.
Mm-hmm.
As far as dishes, so when you go from South to Midwest, I think barbecue is kind of the natural cuisine to think about. So in North Carolina, which is a barbecue famous state, it's very chopped. It's pork heavy and it's chopped. So it's like whole hog barbecue. Like what we call barbecue in North Carolina actually only refers to pulled pork. So you would say like, let me get a plate of barbecue with mac and cheese and greens. That only means pulled pork. If you want ribs, you have to say, let me get some ribs, let me get some brisket. But if you just say like, let me get a pound of barbecue, they're gonna give you a pound of chopped pork.
Wow.
So then I went to St. Louis, and St. Louis is also a barbecue city. And there, everything is ribs and a little bit more beef heavy. So the ribs is fire, but they chop off. They have a St. Louis cut, so they chop off the rib tips.
Yep.
And sometimes they serve them. Then in Chicago, they are rib tip obsessed.
We love the rib tips.
Y'all love rib tips. I never ate a rib tip until I moved to St. Louis. I never ate a rib tip until I went to the Midwest, which is pretty funny.
I'm sorry, bro.
Y'all love them now. I was missing out. I was 100% missing out, bro. I had no idea. So Chicago, have you been to Limbs? I think it's on 75th.
Limbs
Wow.
does not ring a bell.
Okay, so that's my rib tip spot on the south side, and it's off the chain. And so that was like a new thing for me, which is pretty funny. Is how like south side of Chicago has a very unique style of barbecue. And then I'll finish our barbecue journey because Bay Area barbecue is trash. And what it is everyone is doing Central Texas barbecue. Central Texas barbecue is a dog whistle word for white people barbecue. I hate to say it. I'm gonna put it out there, okay?
Yeah.
Texas, they're great at cooking meat, but they don't season their meat. Now I'm not lying. Like they want to put a big hunk of beef on a smoker, but a little bit of salt and pepper, and they want to and no sauce, and they want to let the meat speak for itself. So I've been here for 3.5 years, and I didn't have no good barbecue in here until Horn Barbecue just opened in Oakland in the old Brown Sugar Kitchen.
Okay.
And it's Black owned, and they barbecue it's incredible. It's right.
Nice.
So that's how I'll end my lifelong barbecue obsession. I have 2 smokers on my patio right now, but that's how I'll end my food question for you.
This man is serious. I appreciate the recommendations. I put limbs on my little list, so when I go back home, I check that out. And then to my white brothers and sisters, I think that it's just a difference in preference. So like, we just prefer different seasoning.
Go ahead and clean that up.
Like it's so weird. Like you go to Whole Foods Hot Bar or like somewhere and you're like, dang, this is bland. This needs this or this needs that. And I guess you can't undo food. So it's maybe preferential for you to just put it out there the way that it is and then just have us doctor it up the way we like it. So that's what I've, in my own mind, determined was the logic and the reasoning behind some of this madness. So yeah, I appreciate that. How about, let's move to like your travels, maybe favorite couple of places that you've been. People will be watching this from kind of all over. So other countries, other states, other cities, like within the U.S., maybe top 2 or 3 vacations that you've been able to experience.
For sure. So I'll start U.S. and then go global. I'm a little bit strange. I find that most large cities have something pretty cool to offer me. I loved Chicago and Detroit. I really am interested in regional Blackness. I'm always fascinated by the Black cultures that exist in every city. The place that I have not lived in, but I recently have come to love is New Orleans. I think it's just an incredible, densely cultured Black city, and I look forward to going back there many times. Family's from DC, so I spent a lot of time there. I have love for it. It kind of just feels like Granny's house, I would say. And then going abroad, talking about traveling just feels like this old life I used to live in this time of COVID. But we went to Thailand in 2019. We had an incredible time there, just eating all the food and living a very relaxed existence. Super service focused country. So they're like their level of detail, attention to detail for service was incredible. It really actually made us feel awkward a lot of times, like the amount of effort they put into giving good service. I've been to Europe a few times. Europe is cool. It's flexy, but it's, to be honest, it's fine. Yeah. I've been to Brazil twice. Brazil is insane. I love it. It's just like Brazil opened my eyes to the fact that Black people is like thriving, existing in many other places in the world, even outside of the continent.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I'll end and just say I did go to the continent, though. I've been to Ethiopia, and we're actually planning a honeymoon in a few different countries. We were going to do Cape Town, Zanzibar, and perhaps like there's a beach in Mozambique. And I always find that super inspirational just to see the original, Black experience. Like I learned a lot about, I'm a Christian. I learned a lot about the faith by being in Ethiopia because they have a version of Christianity that is older than European Christianity and thus way older than American Christianity. And that was pretty powerful to just explore that and recognize that we have roots that are way deeper than a lot of the histories that are taught to us.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had another person that I had a green room conversation with tell me um, how much she appreciated being in South Africa, and that's like her favorite place outside of the U.S. to be. And just because it flipped on its head the fact that like you're a minority here in the USA, but like when you go to the continent, how it's mostly like you're part of the big kind of vast majority, whatever country you go to, almost whatever city you go to, you just feel kind of more at home. And it's a sense that you really haven't felt that in America, even if it's a mostly black neighborhood or city, like by and large for the country, that's something that is few and far between feeling like that. So I appreciate that. I haven't been there myself, but it's on my bucket list. Going to Brazil made me think of the statistic that only like a minority of all of the slaves who came from Africa to come westward, like ended up in the United States. So there's so many more that are in South America, and then the islands between North and South America, and then just a smaller fraction actually ended up in the U.S. So that's interesting, kind of fun fact for people to chew on. And then Thailand. Did you guys stay in Bangkok, or did you do Phuket and like Chiang Mai in the north? Like, did you do all the cities, or did you just stay in one part of it?
No, yeah, yeah. So we flew into Bangkok. We really didn't spend much time there. We were in Phuket and traveled around that island.
Got it. Got it.
Pretty much all of our time. Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody.
Yeah, and I would just note kind of what you said. The experience of um, going to the continent and, like you said, recognizing that you are the huge majority is worth every dollar. It's worth anything that you can afford to get yourself there. Like that I will never, that will never not influence me in a dramatic fashion.
Hmm. Yeah.
And like I said, I lived in black areas my whole life in America as a child and as an adult. But when you walk into, it's not the neighborhoods. It's actually the spaces like bars and restaurants and clubs. Because we as Black Americans we've never just had the resources to take over such spaces.
Yeah.
When you walk into a bar or a club and you recognize that every single choice made in that establishment was for a Black person, and then you think about that, you extrapolate that to the fact that every single bar, restaurant, club, store is that same way for thousands and thousands of miles. It's a little bit mind blowing as a Black American.
Yeah. The same way that it's mind blowing to like be a student of history now and to understand like our generation isn't necessarily smarter for thinking of these things up and like executing on them and seeing more success than the previous generation. You're like, oh no, my parents had tried this, my grandma had tried this, my great grandmother had tried this, but the country actively kind of blocked and fought against the progress. So I need to give them more grace and more credit for
Oh
getting
my
where they
God.
got despite that. You know what I mean?
Let me just piggyback on that. Like, there was a shirt that was popular for Blacks a few years ago. It was like, I am not my ancestors. You can get these hands.
Yeah.
I want to rip that shirt off the back of every person I see wearing it. Like, do you know how ignorant and just wrong you are to, like, there is nothing we have done that people long before us didn't do.
Yep.
I mean, just like, if you just talking about hands, like, Black people been shooting back at the KKK, been escaping, been rioting, been doing all of the shit you can think of. That was never not been a thing. Of course, it's not in the history books because who wrote the history book, right? So just that alone, and then this land, real estate, hustling. There's a reason that we don't learn about the Reconstruction when we're kids, because Black people was eaten. They got freed, and before the white people got all their systemic racism in place, we went crazy. We bought all the shit. We had Wall Streets in all these cities. We had land everywhere. We had all of these. We had politicians. We had senators. We had mayors. We had all these things. And then 10 years later, white people were like, oh, hold up.
Yep.
Wait, they free.
Yeah.
How we gonna stop this? Right? How we gonna, they done did too much. I'm about to use some bad language. I'm reading it back to Stanford. So then we put in all of the things that exist today. The Klan didn't go crazy until after Black people was free. The Confederate flag wasn't even used until long after slavery because they needed a symbol to unite the racist white folks and get Black people back under control. We done did all the things that I'm trying to do these days. All that shit was done and then stolen from us.
Yeah.
Right? So I just, whenever someone brings that up, I have to go on a quick mini rant for us to understand our ancestors have never failed us. They have only been murdered and robbed. And that is why any of us who are not at a place on the ladder that we want to be, that is the why. And that's really important for us to understand.
Yeah. And that's motivation. Like for me to go back, I made lemonade. I'll tell this quick story. Like when you study engineering, like we both have, right? You have to dive deep into that thing. And it was to the detriment of me taking general education courses in college to learn more about the African-American history and all of that I never got in, primary school and high school. So to come out and to do a job in the technology industry, while not knowing kind of the full texture and context and background of my history, it started to irk me. So this Bay Area traffic that we used to have pre-COVID, I had me going an hour each way to get to my, city of employment and then back home every day. So I started downloading these Audible books, started with the memoirs, got super into just learning about kind of the history of our country and the intersection of Black history and culture and all of these stories that I was never told started to come to me, and the appreciation and gratitude and just I've got to tell other people about this, and I've got to figure out a way to integrate this into my 9-year-old, my 4-year-old, and my now 2-year-old's life in a way that was not done for me kind of in the public education system that this country has provided for the masses of children that are growing up. So it's, for people who are watching this is a tangent. We are clearly not in the quick lightning round like I had planned, but this is necessary for y'all to hear just because, you need to know kind of what it is and to pay the respect where respect is due, even if it's not obvious and in the open and mainstream like that. So
yeah,
I'm off of my tangent. Let's jump to, let's see. So we talked about food, we talked about travels. Let's talk about either what you're watching or what you're reading. Pick a category, books or TV. Let you start there.
Okay. I'm not watching anything great right now, so let's jump with books.
Okay, so if we're doing books, just give us either some stuff that you popped into recently, or maybe you could just go greatest of all time. These are some recommendations that I've got.
Yeah, for sure. So I read a lot of science fiction, which I love because it just helps with the imagination and creativity. And randomly Black women just dominate the genre, which is pretty dope to me. If you haven't read Octavia Butler and N.K. Jemisin is a Black woman. A lot of people don't know that. Please go do that. I'm currently reading Ben Horowitz's book, but it's not super applicable to me personally. It's called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. It's pretty specific for people who are in the venture-backed, who want to be CEOs of venture-backed startups, and that's not really a goal of mine.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily. It's good, and so I'm probably gonna finish it, but that's not my mission. I thought that was my mission for a little while, but I don't think that's in my path.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm also reading a really great book called I'm a obsessive, voracious reader, so I try to read 30, 40 books a year. But the key to that is I put down a lot of books. So you got to be willing to cut your losses when it's not hitting. So I tell people that all the time. I'm reading this book called How to Do Nothing, and it's a book about the attention economy. And it's pretty interesting because we all know now that big social medias, for a long time, we thought we were the clients of big social media, and now we all know that we are the product. Our data is the product. And what that looks like is our attention is truly the commodity that is creating value for the Facebooks, Twitters, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
And that has a lot of implications on society as a whole, and also you as an individual, your ability to think and create and to be mentally healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So this book is spending a lot of time just talking about how to redirect your attention, why your attention has degraded to the point it is, because most of us have incredibly small attention spans now.
Yeah.
And kind of the impact on yourself and your community that reality has. So I'm really enjoying that right now too.
Yeah, I'll throw a few more since we're on this particular topic. Attention Merchants is another one by Tim Wu. That's a little bit about that. Surveillance Capitalism is another book that talks about just the whole system of how humans walk around oozing data for different folks who have cameras and like systems to collect that and then target advertisements towards you. Surveillance Capitalism is a good one. And then finally, there's a book called Zucked, Zucked, that kind of goes through the Facebook story and talks a little bit about how that whole social media empire got built and like the data and implications and all that stuff. So super fascinating. And to your point, like for a long time, we're like, oh yeah, free service. You don't have to pay anything for Gmail or for Maps or for Facebook. And
Right.
on the back end, it's like, oh man, but you're telling them a lot of things that, people who do surveys and people who do market research, pay big money for. So it was a fascinating read as a consumer and kind of just one guy in a universe of 7 billion other people. So yeah, let's jump from there to, you mentioned you play ball. So one, what did you play? And then two, like break us into like what you follow kind of in the sports category.
Sure. Yeah, I was a basketball player. It's funny in this world of Zoom, people don't know how tall you are.
Yeah.
I'm 6'5", which is, it's funny when people see you in real life and they're like, oh my God. Like, yes, I don't look very tall seated down, but I am a big person. So I played small forward, just some D3 ball, nothing crazy. We did win a national championship at that level. It's pretty cool. Got a big diamond ring up in the closet. And so today what I follow is obviously NBA and college hoops. I'm a Duke basketball fan. My parents went to Duke. NBA, I'm kind of a man without a team, I would say, just because North Carolina didn't have a team.
Yeah.
And then we had the Bobcats, and they're trash. So I'm a big Dame fan because he's from Oakland. I like the Blazers. I'm kind of here for LeBron's quest. I'm like, okay, yeah, I respect it, I would say. And then I don't actually watch football anymore because my family is a Redskins family. Redskins have always been trash, except that one year RG3 went crazy. And, once the Kaepernick thing went down, I boycotted for a while.
Yeah.
Then I realized it's like, my team's not good anyway. So I'm completely divested from that sport, I would say.
Got it. That's, I just learned something new. I had no idea you were that tall and could probably dunk on me. So, God bless Zoom for that. I myself, as a Chicagoan, you obviously have to root for Mike in the 90s and you get defaulted into the Chicago Bears. And every year I put so much energy into watching. And then every year my expectation just like dwindles as the season goes on. So I feel like the more attention I pay to my home team, for football and basketball these last couple of years, like the worse they do. So if I could just like check in on the scores every week, I'll be pleasantly surprised that we won or that we did better than expected. And then if not, I'm not doing so bad because I wasn't emotionally invested in the first place. So I'm with you there, man.
Yeah.
Maybe the last question, as a baller, like you probably have a shoe collection and are into kind of streetwear and sneaker culture. So I got some fours on right now. Breads are like my favorite. Like, give me a couple favorite pairs of shoes or brands that you're big into these days.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So my first job in high school was at Finish Line. So I've been sneaker obsessed for a while. And at the time, I was putting all my paychecks right back into the company. So I have, but I'm on my, I'm well under control as a sneakerhead now. My collection was around 50 pairs of sneakers for years, and now I hold myself to a number. I have a max. So I will not let myself own more than 15 pairs of sneakers at a time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's usually like 3 to 4 pairs of J's. So right now I have cement threes. I have the pair of Saint Germain sixes. I have some bread ones. And then I have a pair of the Balenciaga Speed Runners.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have, your filler stuff. Got some Chucks, some Blazers, some Vans, that type of thing. So definitely big into it, but very much like I keep it under control, right? Clothing wise, I keep it simple. I rarely even wear shirts that have words on them. This is from the museum, the lynching museum in Mississippi, I believe, or Alabama, and Alabama. But other than that, I'm just like plain black t-shirts, Carhartt, Dickies, athletic gear. That's about it.
Yeah, it's funny, like when you make the transition over from doing a regular day job to knowing about like alternative investments that you can be making or ways that you can kind of spend your time to build your wealth. How like the stuff you used to like appreciate and like spend so much time on as a kid doesn't hit the same way. You know what I mean? It's like, man, I spent so much time collecting baseball cards, basketball cards, pairs of sneakers, focus on fashion, East Bay magazines. I used to collect them and like look at the gear like incessantly. And now it's like, man, somebody would have gave me Rich Dad, Poor Dad when I was like 7 years old or 8 years old. Maybe I could retire by the time I hit 40 or 50, you know what I mean? So it's sort of call it out.
Yeah, no, the entrepreneurship helps keep it in line because I'm just like, oh, like I do like this other pair of J's, but I already got my 3 or 4 or something, and I'm trying to rack up another like, 20K, 25K to throw back into my next real estate deal. So it's just, you make yourself intentionally cash poor a lot.
Yeah. So for everybody out there who's watching this, I know we're basically at the end of our time, but it does matter kind of where you spend your attention, obviously where you spend your money and how you educate yourself. So if J's are the only thing in your world and like clothes are what dominate what you're doing and thinking about, just know from Austin and from me that there's billions and trillions of dollars being made from the folks who are owning these companies, from the folks who have these very large real estate portfolios. And like we said, the internet connection is all you need to start educating yourself on how you can get into the game. People like both of us are happy to help and assist. And again, the world is getting like, it's been interesting, but it's getting even more interesting as technology moves us forward. So my brother, I appreciate you making some time to chill and to chat on this episode of The Green Room. Any final words for the people? I hope you have fun in this chat and learn some stuff. And maybe we can connect and do this again at some point. But yeah, I'll leave it to you for the final words. And again, thank you, heartfelt, big ups for coming and doing what you're doing and sharing some of that with us.
Yeah, for sure. I think I would just say, like you said, the world is an interesting place. We should all be students of the world. We should all learn new things and apply that knowledge as aggressively as possible, and just study history and give yourself a grounding. Because most of the time, all of us who aren't from any background of privilege can quickly get motivation just from the things that our people survived to allow us to stand here. And so, yeah, just give yourself that foundation. And with that foundation, you can go and do some big things. So thank you, Brandon. Stanford Community College is so dope. I hope you all continue next year, move on to new universities. Let's disrupt education and just give it away. Let's give it to the masses and do something else cool with it.
Let's do it, man. Well, happy Friday to you and yours. Be kind, be good to yourself, be well, and we will catch up very, very soon, man. I appreciate you.
All right, brother. I'll talk to you later.
All right, see you, man.